everyone. Morning, everyone. If everyone will take their seats, and we'll get started. Goodness, late. I'm really slipping. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for coming. We're going to get right into it as usual. I am going to change the order because Rob Merchant was stuck in traffic, like many of you were, who are coming from the north of the Broad. Yeah. Alice and Tab, did you hear that?
I heard it, but I live around the corner.
We did this on purpose. Okay, so we're going to start with Bluffton's ordinance regarding the 50-foot buffer from the wetlands. There's been a lot of chat on that since they did it. So last month, the board asked that we get a little rundown on what that's all about. So Kevin Eichhardt is going to do that presentation. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor Williams. You'll notice here on our main slide, I got a little man holding his hand up, and if you guys remember at the last meeting, I raised my hand to make a comment, and because of that, I'm now doing the presentation on this. So we're going to just talk about what the town of Bluffton is doing as it relates to wetlands and buffers. As most of you will remember, that in 2023, the Sackett versus the EPA decision came out, and in essence, a lot of the wetlands that were protected on a federal level were no longer protected. So a lot of municipalities, states have been scrambling. Town of Bluffton, we've kind of been taking the lead. We felt that what we wanted to do is to put regulations in place. Number one is to determine what wetlands are, and then be able to move forward. So this diagram here, it's a good one, and also I'd like to state that our watershed management recharges our aquifers and ultimately is discharged. So these amendments are for protection, conservation of the existing wetlands, and then to establish the wetland buffers for stormwater management. One of the big things that I wanted to put on here, it says the revisions of the definition of wetlands will ensure that any and all areas identified in the wetland delineation is viewed as wetlands protected as such, regardless of whether the wetlands are considered jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional. That's one of the biggest issues that we're faced with is the non-jurisdictional freshwater wetlands. These are isolated pockets. These are waters that are not navigable waters. So these are the big ones that our goal is to protect them. All right, so we've put an ordinance together. It's gone through first reading, pending doctrine, so it is established. Some of the items, number one was we wanted to define what a wetland is, and obviously our goal is to protect them. So we included language with the wetland buffer for protections of themselves, and as well as we revised the violations, enforcement, and penalties. So on the state level, state has regulations in place to help protect them, especially for the 8 counties on the coastal counties. That's that CZC process. Now, I'll also state that, and speaking with engineers that work in this field, they say, well, there's already protections in place at the state level. Like, yes, there is. However, we need to establish these as well so that way we can enforce them. So if we can't enforce state rules, but we can enforce local rules. So that's one of the big items, is that we wanted to make sure that we have the ability to go out there, and if we see someone that is impacting a wetland, our stormwater team can go out there and find them, they can ticket them, they can make them get back to the state that it was supposed to be in. So that's one of the big reasons that we're doing this. So next, what does this all mean? Like, really, what does this look like? How does this work? So I'm going to provide an example here for you. This is an example of a 26-lot subdivision. It's roughly on 5.7 acres. We have a form-based code, so they can adjust the lot lines as they so choose. And as long as you can fit everything in, then you can build however many lots that would work. So this example, and this is a real-life example that's going through right now. So pre-wetlands development, so you can see the red line here, and I've just kind of superimposed that to show you where the wetland is located. Now, this application came in on March 18th. We had pending doctrine on March 11th. So they came in a week after all our ordinance came into effect. So as you can see, they were proposing the 26 lots. They did not provide a buffer. They were impacting a non-jurisdictional wetland, which is kind of hard to see, but it's right in this area right here. And as I stated, it was submitted 1 week after our application came in. So they came up with a revision. So now, as you can see, we require a 50-foot buffer along the wetlands. So that'd be here. That's the yellow line right there. And then, so that knocked them down to 18 lots. With that, they are still proposing the impact on that non-jurisdictional wetland. So you can see right here is that if they were to come in, that area right now, as our ordinance reads, is protected. So they would have to redesign this site in order to protect not only the non-jurisdictional wetland, even though it is 0.1 acre, it is there, as well as a 50-foot buffer around that. So hopefully everyone can see the red and the yellow. So they are they're going to move forward to request a variance in order to impact that wetland. Now, I'd also state that had there been an improved Army Corps of Engineers impact for that wetland, then that's something that would still apply, because you'd be, in essence, grandfathered in, you'd be vested in having that ability. However, they have not submitted for that. Therefore, they do not have the ability to impact that. Also, with our protections that are now in place, we have clearly established what a wetland is, we've established what a buffer is, and that our ultimate goal is to protect them. So, as they move forward, if they were to move forward without a variance, in essence, based off the design that they've shown, they would look to have 12 lots. So this is an example of why we're putting this in place. All of these properties, a lot of properties, as everyone knows, we're surrounded by wetlands. We're surrounded by the non-jurisdictional wetlands. And the ultimate goal of town council is to protect these wetlands. And this is a prime example of how you have a site that, while form-based code allows them, they can fit up to 26, what they thought they could, it is now reduced down to possibly 18 or 12. So that is a very, very high level. I didn't want to get into the weeds, but just to give you an idea of what this wetlands buffer is and how that impacts development. And that's really my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the group may have.
Okay, let's start with the board. Anyone from the board have questions? Alice?
Yes. Can you hear me okay? Who is code enforcement enforcing it, or do you have a staff person that specializes in wetlands?
That'd be our watershed management division. They have inspectors, so we have multiple inspectors as well as the manager. So in essence, 2 to 3 individuals.
Anyone else?
I have 2
Josh?
questions. So the first one is, if the federally established Clean Water Act was overturned in court and the definition of what a wetland was and what was previously protected was changed, what is it that provides the localities more protection, or is potential litigation a consideration, and how would that be overcome if something like this was implemented and then challenged?
That is a good legal question. I don't have any answer for it. I really don't.
Sorry. One of the things that the Sackett decision did, and we actually have our legal counsel here who can address that, or one of our legal counsels, if she's still here. But it didn't change the definition as much as it changed what the federal government could oversee. So jurisdictional wetland, with the Clean Water Act, they started defining how, like, navigable water sources and how far away from that you could get. So these are considered inland freshwater wetlands. They said that they didn't have jurisdiction over those. They didn't say they didn't exist, or change the definition. They just said that that the Corps of Engineers doesn't have jurisdiction to issue permits over those anymore. So we've now taken that into our jurisdiction to issue, to oversee. So I don't know if that clarifies, or if I said anything wrong, Brittany, okay. So.
Okay. And then the second question would be, if I remember right, you guys had DNR provide a watershed assessment report. That was one of the things on the original checklist. How long did that take to get back? You remember?
Sure, it's something we can look into and give to you. But I'd also state that one of the things that the town is working towards is an overall inventory of all wetlands. We've hired a consultant to help to establish all the wetlands. That gives us a baseline in order to move forward. Because one of the concerns that we have right now is, well, how do you determine where the wetland is? So when someone were to, if you were to submit an application, we would look at, while National Wetlands Inventory Map is a source, it's not the end-all be-all, but we would ask applicants to be able to clearly define where the wetlands are. And then we look at aerials, past information to determine if they are accurate, and then we use that information as we're moving forward.
Okay, so is the idea for Bluffton to have this built into their GIS system to where if somebody owns the property, they'd be able to understand exactly where the wetlands were and then maybe what the buffer is around it prior to getting the first step in development?
Absolutely. That's the intent. That's the inventory that we're going to do.
Time frame on that is the first part of 26. We're
Yep.
supposed to have that back from our consultant. It was about a 9 to 12 month turnaround. on that.
Correct.
9 to 12 months from the time you guys started?
Yeah.
Okay.
Months ago.
Yep.
And once that is completed, they'll actually come back with a updated and new model ordinance for us to match everything that they're completing for us as well.
So Kevin, you got you got some large tracts of land out there that have value based upon where it was purchased, right? When it was purchased. Are you hearing of pending lawsuits coming around challenging it? Because from a 26 to 18 to 12, there's a difference in value on that property. So I'm just curious how y'all are going to address that, and especially going forward, as properties are sold, because that buyer needs to be aware of these elements that reduces the buildable footprint.
I will say that we've heard concerns. We've heard concerns about that. And I understand what you're referring to from an entitlement standpoint. Someone's moving forward and they're basing financing on X, Y, and Z of this amount of land mass, and we're in essence changing the rules.
Right. And I'm asking this because we're going through our land management ordinance rewrite process now, where we're going to increase open area on property, but also reduce the number of units per acre. So same challenge.
Yes.
But it's better for the area. But I just was curious.
Yeah.
I would, just to go along with that, say that any time that council adopts anything with land use, it can be seen as reducing the right. If you increase setbacks or you change lot line sizes or any of that, there's always a risk. But again, that lies within the authority of the local governments to determine the buildability of the land. And we had that conversation ahead of adopting this, that should lawsuits come, if we were prepared for that. We knew that was a byproduct.
And one thing I'd also like to add is that code design manual, better site design is actually one of the factors in doing this, and there are multiple ways to develop sites. So just because the way that you think will not work doesn't mean that there's not another way. So it actually challenges individuals to be able to come up with different designs. Maybe the lot is not a acre lot. Maybe the lot is a quarter acre. Those are some of the things that need to be looked at. And I think it's just it will force engineers and land planners to rethink how they design sites.
Anyone else from the board?
I just had one clarifying question, and I don't have it in front of me, but did I see something in the ordinance that exempted lots that were less than 5 acres, or no?
It's, there is a statement in here, and you have to give me a second here to find, it's an exemption specific, for a specific reason. And I can talk to you afterwards, just for the sake of time, to show that to you and explain it.
So one other question. This example shows reduction in the number of lots. What about the density? So if someone wanted to build multifamily instead of single family?
You're correct. So we have a form-based code, which that they could come up with an alternative solution for the number of units that they're looking to do. And if they wanted to change the design, if they wanted to go from single family to a multifamily, they could still get the number of units. Again, that gets back to that better site design. And you know, one of the requirements that we have and we've changed in our code is in this type of development is if you are less than 50-foot wide width of lots, you now have to have a rear-loaded product. And the intent is from a neo-traditional type design is that you're bringing the buildings up to the front and not necessarily having garages up to the front. So that's why you see that this site design and the one previous to it, the initial one, it's alley fed. Now they could come back with a different product. They could come back with multiple things to, if they have a number in mind, they could try to find a way to make it work.
Anyone else from the board? I have a couple questions, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Your ordinance changes to 50 feet. What was it prior?
It depends. It depends on a lot of the development agreements. If there is language in there for a specific amount, then they would have to meet that. Some of them show a range where you might be able to lessen the buffer on one side as long as you provided more somewhere else. So there was not a hard and fast number that was specifically required. Now, that was previously, and obviously with the decision in 2023, and then in 2024, we came through and provided a text amendment to apply a 25-foot buffer across the board. The way that we had it written was not, it wasn't applicable. So that's why we're here today with the 50, with the changes of actual definitions of wetlands and the wetland buffers. And it's part of the whole process as we're moving forward. One of the goals I think coming from this is to spur on from a state level. If you think about it, that if however many municipalities are in South Carolina, if each one of them have their own rules and regulations, that's not good. So I think hopefully this will help establish a state a solution to this as well.
So obviously, the builders in general would have an objection to this because it reduces how they can build on the land or how they originally planned. Do you expect to have a statewide lobby object to this?
That's more directed towards the town manager for that.
We have not heard from any statewide lobby on this yet. As Kevin outlined, the concerns that we've dealt with in the interim between first reading and second reading have been mostly related to just trying to understand the impacts. And also, there will be some minor tweaks that will come to council in between first and second. One of the things that wasn't included was kind of an appeals process within there, so that's something that will be added. But those are most of the concerns that we've had. As Kevin outlined earlier, part of the conversations we had have been related to alternative developments. Instead of, yes, you're trying to squeeze 26 lots, as many rectangles as you can on the piece of property you have you looked at alternatives? And if your answer is no, then a variance isn't probably going to be something that you're going to qualify for. It's, again, there's more than one way to develop a single piece of property within the town or with anywhere. And we're trying to get people to revisit and do smart growth on their property and smart development on their property besides just trying to fit as many rectangles as they possibly can.
Okay. One last question. If you go back to the other slide where lots 7 and 8 are impacted with the wetland, now, that's jurisdictional or non-jurisdictional?
Non-jurisdictional.
Non-jurisdictional. So prior, if I have my facts correct, these wetlands could be traded, in other words, buy wetlands somewhere else. Does that law still apply?
That's the whole intent of this ordinance, is to say, no, that these are the ones that we're protecting.
You're going to protect that, and you're not going to be able to trade it off for another area.
The key to remember, and this is one of the, if you ask council why this was adopted, I think you would get a variety of reasons. But one of the main reasons that we're pushing forward with it is for flooding that has occurred. And the stormwater system and wetlands go into preventing flooding in the future. Because if you preserve your wetlands, you have a place for the water to sit. When hurricanes come through, when storms come through, you have that natural place to hold water. Buying a wetland in Yemassee and changing it out for one that sits in the heart of Old Town doesn't change that may now lead to flooding within those homes in the future. So the goal is to protect the wetlands where they sit within the town to make sure that they can serve their purpose long-term, which is to be wetlands to hold water and to protect during stormwater as stormwater is being designed and built and flooding or rain events come in the future.
Thank you. As our philosophy is, let no good idea go uncopied. The city of Hardeeville is looking at your ordinance and looking to adopt the same or similar ordinance for our city. So thank you for that. Okay, now at this point, I'd like to open it up to the public. Anyone from the public who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Okay. We're going to thank you, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for the town of Bluffton for providing this information.
From a next step standpoint, we're doing a workshop on April 29th with Town Council, just to go over changes from that first reading to second reading proposed. And then May 13th will be the second and final reading.
Would you please share that after you've
Yes, sir.
done whatever modifications, because our staff is looking at it as well.
Sounds good. We can do that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, next, we're going to go, has Rob shown up? We're going to give you a chance to catch your breath, and we're going to put you on last, okay? So, and right now, I'm going to ask Mr. Tom Lennox to come up. He has a couple slides. If you'll recall from last meeting, there was a proposal from a task force to be adopted by Soloco, and we asked him to come back today with some more details on what this task force is hoping to accomplish. Tom, welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all for being here. Last month, we talked very briefly about this task force, and it's charged with developing a framework or structure for a regional 20-year plan. And most appropriately, you asked for more detail about the mission. If you would focus on the middle paragraph, you see the mission is more clearly defined as creating a structured, inclusive, and adaptive framework that enables diverse stakeholders to collaborate, align priorities, and address regional challenges. Sounds like Soloco. And that framework will probably include, among others, how do I advance the slide? There.
Okay.
Probably, among others, issues such as governance, baseline assessments of the entire region, a vision and goals for the region, strategies, management and implementation plans, and measurement and evaluation. We'll be discussing our estimated time to complete this project, but for now, we'll start with 90 days and adjust if the project and work expands. I anticipate this list to be incomplete and will change significantly from the next time I present it to you all.
Thank you, Tom. Now, the question before the board is, this is a task force that is, who had initially initiated this? Was this GIC?
GIC has expanded their focus from island-centric to regional-centric. So this concept was actually born by last year and picked up by GIC this year.
So the question before the board is, do we want to adopt this as an official SoLoco subcommittee, task force, whatever you want to, however way you want to call it? So that's the decision before this board. Given that, are there any comments or questions from the board?
I have a question. Oh.
Please.
I think it would be beneficial if we hear what Rob Merchant talks about, what they've already been working on, that group, because there's some overlap, and some of your goals are included in that group's goals. So, we might want to separate some of these things into, we want to have, you'll hear Rob talk about what the next steps are, but, some of your goals are admirable, but some of them I think we'll be covering if we do a workshop in the near future about growth, particularly.
That's a good point. We want to maximize everyone's efforts and not duplicate that. Thanks, Alice. John?
Ms. Howard said, Alice said she's doing Beaufort, but I think that group is supposed to be the regional.
No, that's not what I meant.
Oh.
Rob's going to address Jasper and Beaufort
Oh, okay.
County. That group addressed both.
Rob,
Yeah.
Rob is doing, this is a
It's both.
SoLoco, which
SoLoco.
includes both.
Right.
I just want to make sure that's
It is.
included.
You're right.
We would never forget you, John.
I'll make sure of that. Thank you.
Josh?
I do have a comment, but with Ms. Howard's suggestion, I'm going to hold my comment until after we hear from Rob Merchant.
At this point, I'll ask the public if you have any comments or questions regarding this proposal. Okay, so why don't we adopt Ms. Howard's suggestion, and we'll go and hear from Mr. Merchant. I'm just dictating. Okay. Rob, did you catch your breath?
Yes.
How are you, sir?
Do you have the laptop?
And Rob, could you remind us who was on that committee that y'all worked on? Because it's
Yes.
a variety of people from different, all over.
Okay. And Taylor Ladd is with me also with, or Taylor Logan with Beaufort Jasper Water Sewer Authority. And we've been working together because I think that one advantage of that organization is they are seeing things as a region. And so with that, this subcommittee was appointed by SoLoco, and it's made up of all the planners of the various jurisdictions that make up SoLoco. In addition, we brought in a lot of regional partners to assist us with what the proposed, I guess, action item would be that we would bring back to this committee. So just to pick up where we left off at the last meeting, at the March meeting of SoLoco, this committee presented to you a proposal for a, rather than a full-blown regional plan, more of a series of workshops that would lead to some very specific action items with the goal of a agreed-upon future land use vision for the Lowcountry, for the two counties, Beaufort and Jasper, and all the municipalities within them. And so we presented kind of some information about why we felt it was a good idea to work jointly and some of the consequences if we didn't. And this committee gave us the direction to look into it further and try to provide a better picture of what this strategy might look like, specifically what we're talking about in terms of cost and how that cost might be shared among the jurisdictions. And so what we have now, I would say, is a little more specific, but we do recognize that there's still more work to do in terms of it's SoLoco's direction. If they're interested in moving forward, then we'll talk about what the next steps are. But as I mentioned last time, what we're speaking of is a series or one workshop or a series of workshops where the elected officials and stakeholders in the region would actively engage and work through some important issues facing our region. And out of that process would come recommendations about how we can forward a joint land use vision for the region and what tools would implement that. And so that's what we worked with a consultant who was willing to provide us with some guidance and some very general cost ranges. And so that's kind of what we have now, is a little more detailed scope that reflects that work. So the first phase of this process really would require all the jurisdictions to gather information. So we'd be working with a facilitator to make sure they had all the updated information in terms of land use, of comprehensive plans, the type of base information that if they were having a workshop, that would be presented to each of the participants as this is where we're starting from. And so that work, that would be, that phase one, that advanced work necessary for the workshops. Phase two would be regional workshops. The consultants that we work with, she recommended, and I'm sorry, I'm saying she and I'm pointing to Taylor, and that's, it wasn't Taylor. But the consultant recommended perhaps 2 workshops. I think that one of the things that we're concerned with is if we try to have a whole day workshop, and I've seen that happen, it's very hard to have people who can devote a whole day. You have people coming in and leaving, but it's also, you're very limited to what you could do with a half day. And so what we're looking at is perhaps 2 half-day workshops that build on each other. Maybe questions are raised in the first one, the consultant takes that information, provides, this is what we think you're asking, and then they continue the conversation. And then out of those regional workshops, then we would look at what we're calling a regional growth strategy roadmap. I like the term roadmap because it's not specifically, it provides some ability for the people who participate in the process to decide the level of detail that they would want. What does a future shared land use vision look like? How could that guide our decisions, but still keep us with local autonomy in making those decisions? So, you know, and we chose that is what we're envisioning is kind of working with the SoLoco. If there is an interest in pursuing this further, this gives an idea about what type of budgeting would be necessary to make this happen, recognizing that a scope of work really needs to be refined by this group, that it's not something that should be rushed, and we want to make sure that SoLoco has enough input into the details of this process. But 75 to 100 was arranged that, you know, allows some flexibility in crafting a work program. And what we did was we took each of the jurisdictions at the request of this committee. We went strictly by population and, you know, from each jurisdiction and any unincorporated portions of each county. And so just to give you an idea, 100,000, you know, the biggest hit, it would be Beaufort County at 43. You know, it's basically 43% of the population. You know, Hilton Head and Bluffton are in the teens. No other jurisdiction would be having to pay more than 10,000, you know, with that price range. So we're hoping that this, you know, this general approach, this idea about what it would mean in terms of cost, I guess what we're asking the committee is if they're interested in pursuing this further, then what we believe is, I think it's necessary to hit everyone during the budget season if there's an interest in pursuing this, and then being able to refine the process, because ultimately we would want to craft a request for proposals or request for qualifications and choose a facilitator to pursue this. So. And the relationship between this and the presentation before mine, it sounds like, you know, this is more of a focus on the land use issues, and this is a process that really gets everyone at the table. An entire regional plan would probably take in a lot of other factors, deep dive into demographic trends, a lot of other issues, economic development, housing, those are issues that are typical of a plan, where this is really focusing on a regional vision. So I really believe that the two, if it is the interest of the committee to really consider both approaches, the two can complement each other. This is something that could be, maybe this is phase one of a process that delves deeper, and that's certainly something that the committee may want to look at. With that, we're willing to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Just to put this in the framework before I open it for questions, we have in the past, through the almost 8 years of SoLoco, when we've had a task force ask us to all contribute, the stormwater plan that got done, the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust started pretty much the same way. We all took it back to our councils because this is not a committee or a board that makes those decisions. And then each jurisdiction came back and said yay or nay. So that's what we would have to do again this time, because we don't have the authority to make any budget decisions here. So understanding that, I'm going to open this up to questions first by the board. Do we have any questions from the board here? Josh? He reads first,
Yes.
John.
So Real quickly, I'm not sure why the task force proposal and the growth planning workshop initiative could not run in parallel. To your point, I think that they would actually complement each other. And I didn't take notes on the entire slide, but some of the task force proposal initiatives that jumped out to me were the land use, zoning, transportation and mobility, environment and resiliency, housing and development. And I do think that, as stated in our previous meeting, a lot of the issues is the fact that our development codes compete with each other and they don't complement each other the way that we would initially have wanted. So I think that there's some refinement that needs to be done there, and maybe the task force proposal would focus in on some of those issues, whereas what you're proposing here, for the city of Beaufort, it's not really a tall order for us to pitch in our part at $6,000, but the benefit would be to make sure that our future land use maps are working in conjunction with each other. So one of the deficiencies that I can see in our future land use map is it doesn't give a future land use for properties that are within the growth boundary but not necessarily in the municipality yet. So you have in the county where they will identify future land use for a given parcel, and that parcel may be within the growth boundaries for the city of Beaufort or the town of Port Royal, but our individual future land use maps do not indicate what the future land use would be if annexed into the municipality. So it kind of leaves it wide open, and I think that there's room for improvement there. So I guess all of that just to say that I think that both of these could run in parallel, and for me, based on my understanding in both presentations this morning, I would be in favor of supporting both because I do think that it's needed.
John, did you have something to say?
Two. What was the census, what census did you use for the population, just for?
So this is the American Community Survey, so it's the estimates updating to 2023. The last census, of course, is 2020, so we could go back to those numbers, but this is just the latest information that's available on the American Community Survey.
And I think that with the two groups, I think you should both get together and divide a little bit. This is a huge area. I mean, you have north of the Broad, south of the Broad, Hardyville, Jasper, and then you have Ridgeland. I mean, each one has a little different flavor, right? And what works in south of the Broad doesn't work in Jasper, for the most part. We've seen this many times in the housing trust and all that. So I think that really we should look at it, say, let's take the two committees, put them to get them together and say, okay, they could do part of it, you could do part of it, and see if they meld together. And where they don't meld together, you could put together. But having one committee do the entire area, it just seems to be overwhelming. It's overwhelming to me. So that's my 2 cents in it.
Let me, if you don't mind, jump in real quick. Councilman Kemp, appreciate your input there. I want to make sure that there's an understanding of what Mr. Lennox is proposing. At least what I heard is that they're proposing to put together a recommended structure and approach to developing a plan. They are not going to do the plan. So that is why it's a 90-day time frame, and I think it sounds like an awesome way to go about essentially doing a comprehensive plan for our region. I think that's a great idea, but they're not doing the plan. So what we are actually doing is executing a task item to get somewhere and develop a future land use map and growth framework for the region. So that would be a component of a comprehensive plan once we get there, but so I think that there is some conversation that the two groups could have with the task force from Mr. Lennox's group and as well as what we're doing. But we're doing something that's a little bit more acute than what they're looking at this point in time. So I think they're presenting a pathway to get towards developing a regional plan, but they're not actually going to do the plan yet. So they may have someone in mind, but they're actually providing some really insightful direction.
Something that I think, I agree with what John was saying, is about getting together, and I think that needs to happen sooner than later. To get a clearer understanding, I would want y'all to come back together and say, this is what we are doing, this is how we're going to move forward. I think that a $75,000 to $100,000 cost structure, I think that is on the high side. We just had our strategic action plans back in February, and it was a 2-day event, a deep dive with 2 individuals that came in, and I think we were under $50,000. Understanding this is a larger region and everything else, but I think there are resources out there as well that it should come in much less. And so what I would like to see is that the 2 groups get together and really come back with a clear directive as to what it is that we're looking to move forward. Is it the creation of how to look at it, or is it the actual, or the action of doing it, and how that all fits together? Because there's great knowledge on both sides, and I don't want to see dual efforts out there competing against each other when it is the same, because it does sound like Soloco. So I just want to make certain that we're not duplicating efforts.
I will, thank you, Mayor Perry. I will kind of clarify a little bit as to where the pricing on this is coming from. Some of it has to do with the sheer amount of information and discovery and data that has to be collected and combed through and coordinated. Because, I mean, even like some of you have heard me say this before, if you've come to some of our workshops for our master planning process, within even a 2 square mile area around Port Royal and Bluffton and unincorporated Beaufort County, City of Beaufort and unincorporated Beaufort County, there's 3 different zoning codes, there's 3 different future land use maps. So and this is part of what my consultant with our master plan is going through, is coordinating all of this information, and that legwork does get expensive, as well as the deliverable after the fact. So.
Absolutely. You know, I'm sitting here thinking about Beaufort County EDC and what they're trying to do. I'm sitting here thinking about the Green Tax Committee and what was trying to be done there. And I haven't heard mention of them of being part of this, because we're putting our efforts there with these groups to protect land, to buy density, to bring development in, to bring jobs in, you know, so there's, and I know that with the original, with what Mr. Lennox said, you know, other partners, but there's so much that's going on out there. If we're not all talking cohesively together, then there's going to be something that comes out that one group is not going to agree with, and the EDC is going to continue to move forward with bigger growth and bigger opportunities, that it may not be the will of those municipalities as to what we want to see in this area. So, you know, there's I think a lot more, and I'm not saying there hasn't been a lot of conversation, but to come out today and try to make a decision and bring this back to respective councils and say this is what we think should happen or not happen, I think some more discussion needs to go into it from my standpoint.
I think it's important to mention that we anticipate, you know, we really want elected officials to be, you know, engaging in this process, but we anticipate there to be stakeholders. And I think part of it is, you know, what does each of us recommend as who are those key stakeholders to have in the process? Because, you know, but I think it's important also to have the decision makers, elected officials involved as well. So it's, you know, I agree. We need to make sure that we're, you know, broadening the input that's going into this.
Josh, do you have something further?
One quick comment for clarification. Under your scope where it says create a set of base maps with regional current land use approved developments, is that to say that the intent is to bring into one place all of the PUDs that have been approved so that there's a clear understanding of what was previously approved, and so that doesn't fall off the radar, and maybe when those approvals were to expire, just so that there's a collected hub of previously approved developments?
Yes, I mean, that's an important step of the process, and it is something we've been working on, is to try to compile that information, because some decisions probably can't be walked back, you know, so if there has been development that's been entitled, we need to understand that that's part of, you know, in trying to figure out what a future land use vision looks like, taking into account those entitlements that have already been made. There may be some that, old PUDs that are still sitting there dormant, maybe they're in play, but it's important to have that background information, I agree, and that's an important part of this information gathering. So we're kind of going, eyes wide open about, where we can affect change and where we need to recognize that we've already entitled growth to occur.
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. I agree with the conversation that's happened so far. Looking at this from a regional focus is so important because of all the growth occurring in the Lowcountry. And I see that these two pieces working together. I think the comparison that Taylor Ladd made to a comprehensive land use plan is accurate because there are more elements than land use. And I wrote down, and I'm glad that Mayor Perry mentioned economic development, because I wrote down elements missing from the regional growth strategy would be things like transportation. Infrastructure is great. We're covering water and sewer, and I know that land use does cover transportation as well. But it's certainly a key element now about how to get folks around in our region, and that's not exactly included in land use planning, somewhat, but not exactly. A comp plan does more of that. Also, education. I'm glad to see Carlton Dallas here from the County Board of Education, because we need to also look at the education needs and how does that fit within the regional planning and regional strategic planning. And then economic development. What are we going to do for the future, and how do we work with USCB and LOWCOUNTRY Technical College in order to build some economic development that is reflective of the values of the region? And regional planning can do that. So I see the two pieces working together. I don't want to slow down one group. I want them to continue to move forward, and for us to look at what we need to do to facilitate that, because it's so important right now with all of the growth happening that we not sit and talk, that we do, and this is a way to do it. Thank you.
So if I could summarize what the general conversation is, we would want to direct the task force to proceed, but first talk with Rob and get a clear understanding of what path each will take in the future. Secondly, Mayor Perry's suggestion is to take another look at exactly what, if there are other options to the cost. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, to some degree, after hearing what you're saying about some of the documents pulling in and things like that, the challenge is, obviously explore, but, is this an opportunity to pull in somebody from USCB that's going through a business school that can help out? There's some opportunities there. So that's how my mind goes immediately. But
also, if you could forward to Rob, who you used, and get just take a look and see if there's another option. I would add to that each of these jurisdictions out there update their numbers. I don't want to put the city of Hardeeville into spending more money, but I think the numbers are a little low in our case, and maybe even Bluffton as well. So, no.
Our numbers look a little high to me.
I like it. Might be saving us.
Perhaps, Rob, what I would suggest to you is to ask each one of these jurisdictions to give their updated numbers and then reevaluate how it's broken down. And then come back, is next month too soon? And so next month, Tom, please work with Rob. Can we ask you to do that? I see Tom's task force. This is free labor. Why not take advantage of their capabilities? So, what's that?
I think it's free.
Tom is free. and then come back next month with a follow-up report, and then each of us can, or the board can decide whether or not we want to take this proposal to our individual jurisdictions and assign those funds. I don't think we can let it go any further than next month, because the votes on everybody's budget will be passed. So I would ask the board to please do some initial temperature taking of each one of our councils as to whether or not you would be interested in adding this to your budgets. And that way, we can go forward.
Can we get this virtually so we can share?
Okay.
I had one question to Rob. I don't want to put you on the spot. Did you happen to bring the slide with the updated?
Yes, I do have that.
There was a discrepancy on when he made the previous presentation about number of permits, and Joe Passmont caught it, actually, about West Argent and East Argent. So just if y'all can see that, and we can share it with everyone, too.
Yeah, we actually,
Yeah.
we had the same number for West Argent and East Argent, so we updated that, but we also found out that the bottom line is actually greater than what we presented at the last meeting. I think we had a number around 5, and it's actually 53,000.
Yeah, it's a wow slide.
And I would take a look at the, some of the Hardyville numbers, just know that those two you might want to get from the jurisdictions, because I think those numbers are slightly off as well.
Article should pay the whole thing.
I don't want to go that far, Frank.
Yeah, and this gives you, we're still refining, we have an online map that we're refining, and our goal is to have that something that is available so that people have an idea about future growth in the area, but we're not going to release that until we're comfortable and we have every jurisdiction comfortable with the numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you. Before I leave this subject, does anyone from the public have any comments or questions? And don't leave, Rob. You're going to tell us about the survey, right?
The
The
plastic bag survey.
Plastic bag.
Change gears.
Okay, why don't we do that, and then if there are any questions from the public regarding either one, we can do that.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a few, yeah.
And I'll be real brief with this because this is still sort of an update. We're still refining the numbers, but so I think maybe about 6 months ago, this committee was presented. I think Grant McClure from the Coastal Conservation League talked about the plastic bag ordinance and consideration of other materials that are accumulating in the Lowcountry, and whether we wanted to take another look at this as a region. And so just to give you an idea of, out of that process, we put together a working group, made up of, really this is right now being initiated by Beaufort County, but we believe that a lot of this work has, the potential to be adopted by each of the jurisdictions. And we would like to do this, in conjunction with others if we do take these extra steps. But we put together a committee involving our planning department, solid waste and recycling. We have some community members on there, Port Royal Sound Foundation, Coastal Conservation League, some of the environmental groups, to look at what types of plastics are accumulating in the Lowcountry, in addition to looking at what other jurisdictions in coastal South Carolina are doing. And what we're finding is that there really is a growing awareness in coastal counties and coastal jurisdictions to limit plastic waste because of concern about water quality and pollution. And so one of the things that we did is we worked with, we reached out to some of those other jurisdictions. City of Charleston was one that we spoke to at length. and we learned some things from them about not only what kind of process they took, to get to where they are, but also looking at how they regulate. There's different ways of regulating or managing the accumulation of plastic, and it doesn't always, correspond with an outright ban, and so that's something we learned from the process as well. But the first thing that we wanted to do, learning from them, was going out to the community with a survey, which I think we provided some update to SoLoco. We wanted to have a survey that included both the business community and the consumers, because we want to make sure that we're hearing from each group and what their concerns are. And we looked at, Juliana prepared this. I forgot I had a little bit of animation in it. But we looked at plastic bags, but also plastic styrofoam containers, styrofoam cups, plastic cutlery, or whatever I want to say, silverware, but it's plasticware, and then straws. So these are the kind of the common items that there's concern about, because a lot of them are one use and they're going out either in the trash or being littered. And we provided some background information and really asked the community to look at, is there an interest in limiting the accumulation of these, and what does that look like? So one of the things that we found, well, we can go into this, but some items such as single-use plastic bags or containers, things like that, there seemed to be a stronger interest in some sort of limitation or ban of those items. But when we got to items like the silverware and the straws, there was a general consensus that maybe a ban is not the best way to move forward, but actually what a lot of jurisdictions do is a law that says these things are available by demand only. And that is something that we found from talking to Charleston was a win-win situation with many of the businesses, because what that does is, because I think if most of you are aware, you go out to a fast food restaurant, they immediately give you a straw with your drink, or you may get a fork with Chinese takeout, but you're taking it home and you can use your own fork. So just by that not automatically offering it provides an opportunity for businesses to reduce the number of materials that they have to purchase, but also the accumulation. Personally, I don't use straws. I'm always handed them at restaurants. And so I would, certainly appreciate something like that. So what we learned from the community in putting out this survey is that there seemed to be, this is just to give you an idea, we got 6,062 consumer responses and 138 business responses. And there seemed to be some general trends in the data that we got from them that we're still in the process of analyzing. But what we're seeing is for plastic bags and for styrofoam containers, those clamshells that seem to be the primary takeout container, there was an interest in really reducing the accumulation of those, where there seemed to be more of a support for some sort of ban of those and using other materials. But for straws and for the silverware, there was more of support for just requiring them to be on request only. And so we're beginning to see this trend of the types of items that the community and the businesses support, regulation and others that where they're looking at some sort of reduction by not requiring them to be handed out. So I think it's encouraging to have some direction. And so what we spoke to our Natural Resources Committee of County Council earlier this month, and we said that we're going to take this information and then come up with some recommendations, kind of a full report of the survey data, and then what we believe as a committee might be some possible paths forward and so presenting that to council. But that kind of gives you an idea of where we are. And so with that, if you have any questions.
First from the board, any comments or questions?
Got a question?
Yes, Mr. Stees.
In looking in what other jurisdictions are doing, have you found anywhere where they're offering any kind of incentive or grants or any kind of program to encourage the use of more like biodegradable or stuff? We've had conversations about if that potential, but wasn't sure if there's a program that exists already.
Yes, actually, City of Charleston had a pilot program where they received some grant funds. And so what they did was they got some, I think they were, cardboard, but different types of clamshell containers that were not styrofoam, and had those available to small businesses. So yeah, there are a lot of opportunities to have a, rolling out, if this is something that the jurisdictions want to pursue. It's not necessarily something where tomorrow, all of a sudden, this is the law. There's maybe a trial period rolling out, encouraging, reaching out to businesses. So I think that that's an important component of this. And I forgot to mention that we learned from talking to the other jurisdictions.
Josh, go ahead. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
So we got two questions. One of them is on the on-demand. So I can see how an on-demand would work if you're at a sit-down restaurant and they don't provide you a straw and then you ask for one or you don't. How does that play into a fast food restaurant where maybe you're going through a drive-through and you pull off before you realize that they didn't put a straw in there, and you don't know that now there's this on-demand on straws or something? So have other municipalities worked through fast food versus a sit-down restaurant?
Yeah, and I think that would come to the outreach and education. It could be that, just having the person at the drive-through window say, do you need a straw with that, before the person leaves, versus expecting the customer to know, oh, I need a straw, I better ask for it,
Yeah, I think that seems pretty tedious. Maybe it's doable. It seems a lot to ask for the individuals working or the consumer. But regardless, if I guess more thought can go into how we address that issue. Another question, because, and this is just acknowledging a very real thing that does happen that shouldn't and has for a long time. On the note of reducing plastics and protecting the environment, has there been any discussion, and if not, why not, on how we reduce the amount of household trash that is burned every day in our community? Because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have done that for a very long time. And if we're going to have a real conversation about protecting the environment, at some point, we have to address that.
Yeah, and I think I agree. It could be part of this, or it could be a separate, I think we all have burn ordinances. Maybe it comes out of a discussion about that. But I mean, that's certainly.
Well, everybody does have burn ordinances, and the burn ordinances have been in place for a while, but it obviously has not reduced the amount of household. I think there has to be something else that's done, and I think it's worthwhile if we're going to have these discussions to also address the fact that those issues exist. Because the reality is even on a plastic bag, I mean, you could take away plastic bags and go to brown paper bags in your grocery store, but the reality is 90 to 95% of what you get in the store while you're shopping is wrapped in plastic, and then you're going to put that in a paper bag. So maybe you reduce it a little bit, but in this case, and I think it's so important that you guys went out and got responses from the businesses, because your large-scale grocery store that can maybe afford another option may not be available to a small business to, if you worked in an incentive of some kind, sure, but I'd want to further understand what the financial impact to a small business is if they have to adapt and maybe provide, a more expensive material for silverware, straws, or what have you.
Thank you, Josh. Can we just, I'll open to the public real quick. Is there any final comments from guests, please?
One quick comment, Mayor Harry Williams, I would be remiss if I didn't say today is Earth Day. And as we're talking about protecting the environment, a couple of suggestions, questions. One is, I think it'd be helpful, first of all, thank you for doing this. Second is next steps. I think is completing analysis of the data from the survey. It might be good to hear more about the data points that you're going to be looking at, because you talked about straws and not much about plastic bags and a little bit about the takeaway containers. But I think it'd be helpful to know about that as well. What are your focus areas? And then two other groups I would suggest that you talk to, and that is the Sea Turtle Patrol on Hilton Head Island and other areas of the Lowcountry, because they talk about the impact on sea turtles of plastic bottles, plastic, other kind of plastic containers. And Outside Foundation, I know they're both doing an island recreation. They're all doing Earth Day activities today, so whoever's doing Earth Day activities, it might be helpful to get their input on the impact on Earth Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so to summarize, we'll hear from Rob and Tom on the May agenda. I'll put that on there. Also, I would ask the board to please, last month we sent everyone a proposed resolution regarding tri-share from the Child Care Subcommittee. I would ask that each jurisdiction give us an update, so that we have at least some idea if there's going to be a yay or a nay. Do you have an idea when, where? We have the luxury of basically a year, because the state will not, their budget is, passed. The city of Hardeeville did pass the resolution last Thursday. We did get a presentation from Mr. Lewis, the head of that subcommittee, to our council. Afterwards, we passed it. I did ask that committee to structure a test, and that given that structure, perhaps the city of Hardeeville would be the test baby. So we'll come back with a test. Hopefully they'll be ready next month, what that would look like and who would fund it and how that actually could take place. Because you have to get the child care facility involved in this, you have to get employers involved in this, and since we can't ask the state, who would fund the third of that? So that's why I asked them to come back and give us what a structure of a test would be, because we have in essence a year to take it to the state. So I'll put that on the agenda for May as well. Are there any other suggestions for May at this time? Okay. Any other thoughts before we adjourn for the day? Mr. Dallas.
Yes, at some point, I don't know when you...
On the what?
On the Silicon Garden, which we won trademark ownership. Dollar School of Business, where I'm on. How we're trying to really target in Silicon Valley, it's two major institutions. Third thing is that brings an entrepreneurial spirit. So those things very similar. We just want to pack them. All the guidance of all the leaders at this particular gathering,
So, would you please send me how much time you would like, a brief overview of what you would like to say to the board, and I will make sure that I'll put it up to the board for whether or not they want that and when. Okay? All right. Thank you. All right. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming. And we'll see you next month.